All right, everyone, we're back with an episode, and to no surprise, it's going to be a lot, or maybe just only, about sharks today. As some of you know, I've caught a really massive bug, I guess, a shark bug over this summer, and I've seen a lot of sharks with my drone. So the more I see, the more questions I have. So I've been trying to source some people to answer them for me. And today we have a master's student, but turning it into a PhD, I believe, from the University of Wollongong, Teaniel Mifsud. Welcome on the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming up. Well, first of all, I have to ask, what's kind of your last experience with a shark?
My last experience, so in person, I think it would have been Christmas, not last year, but the year before. Or maybe even before that. It's a little bit blurry now. It tends to blur together sometimes.
Well, we had a funny year, so that's what kind of skewed everything, I think.
Yeah, I think it has.
It's before, after 2020, I think.
Yeah, so I think we'll say pre-2020.
Yeah.
I was patrolling as a surf lifesaver on, I think it was Boxing Day. And it was a really busy day, really lovely day. Lots of people in the water, lots of people swimming between the flags. And I looked up and I saw something jump in the flags in the wave, and I thought it was a dolphin. And then I looked again, and it was not a dolphin. So yeah, I had to quickly close the beach and get everyone out of the water. And I think in the end it was a rather small Thresher Shark, but yeah, still enough to get a little bit concerned. Because it came out of nowhere really.
So this was in Wollongong?
Yeah, in Wollongong. So Fairy Meadow Beach. So just north of Wollongong, really, the harbour area there. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask, what is the policy? We're probably just delving right into it now, because the more I've learned about sharks, the more I've understood that some sharks are obviously a threat and they're considered more dangerous than other sharks. I think the three main ones are tigers, bulls, and whites.
Yeah. So the big three. Yep.
Big three, yeah. Okay. But then there's also quite a few sharks that's not really that dangerous for humans, I guess, like the dusky whalers that we have in Manly. But what's the policy for the surf lifesaving clubs if they see a shark? Is it all just the same and they close the beach, or does it matter what shark it is?
Normally, the policy is just to close the beach.
Yeah.
It kind of varies depending on the decisions that the lifesavers or lifeguards make. But yeah, in the surf lifesaving policy from memory, it is that we close the beach for, I think it's up to 2 hours. There's a period of time that you'd close the beach for, and then you'd occasionally have people go out and see if you can see the shark again. But
so they go out on a ski or something like
normally in a boat. I have friends who have had to go out on boards because they haven't had a boat. So they kind of had to draw the short straw and swim out on a board, which I definitely would not be doing.
Especially if you don't know what shark it is.
Yeah. So normally you go out on a boat or a jet ski, and most of the time the motors will scare them off anyway, but it's just to see if there's anything still in the water.
Yeah. Because we had a WSL pro surfing event at Narrabeen, and they did actually close the put the event on hold for, I think it was either, I forget now, it was either just 20 minutes or maybe it was 2 hours, because they did see a shark in the water.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, so that's pretty standard, that you just close the beach for a period of time and then kind of wait around, because they move on pretty quickly. Normally when they're coming in that close, they're normally following something, or something's got their attention, and once they work out that either it's not something they don't want or they catch it, they'll go away.
Okay.
So, sharks don't really hang around that often, although I have had stories where they have waited around and people have felt like they were waiting for them to go back in the water, which is interesting in itself. But so the protocols are there, but it's really dependent on what people decide to do. I mean, I've been on beaches before where we think we've seen something and we've shut the beach, and then, the patrolling unit, a kilometre or 2 k's away hasn't shut their beach because they haven't thought it's necessary. So it really is dependent from patrol to patrol.
And for a shark to cover like 1k or 2k's, it's like just 5 minutes or whatever, isn't it? It can be if they're moving.
Yeah, if they're moving, they can be there, but sometimes people just are like, oh, we didn't see it, so it's not our problem. Okay,
so Teaniel, you're studying currently the subject you're studying is shark mitigation, is that right? Or shark encounters?
So yeah, human shark encounters is
Okay.
what I'm looking at. So essentially we're interviewing and collecting stories and narratives from people basically along the south coast. So basically from just south of Sydney and Helensburgh all the way down to kind of Bega, so that whole south coast stretch at the moment. Trying to understand the kind of range of encounters that people have with sharks. So you see a lot of the time in the media, and it tends to be those kind of negative encounters, people getting bumped on their boards or their boards get bitten, even all the way up to where people have actually been bitten by sharks. And you don't really get the other encounters that people tend to have with them, which sometimes can be really fun, exciting, and then sometimes can also be a little bit scary, or even you get them in between where people don't really care or they get annoyed.
Yeah.
I've interviewed some people that were fishing and then they came up and they were spearfishing and they came up and found a shark had decided to eat all of the fish that was on their line. So that wasn't scary, it was more annoying for that person. But yeah, so it's collecting all those kind of range of encounters really.
Yeah. So a lot of your work currently is around interviewing people that have had an encounter, positive or negative, is that right?
Yeah. So currently we have a kind of crowdsource map. So it's an online map that's essentially collecting all of these stories. So people can go on and drop a pin where they've had an encounter and leave a kind of brief overview of what happened and where it happened and when.
Yeah.
And then further to that, if they'd like, they can do a longer form interview with me where we kind of go into detail about it a little bit more.
Okay.
And kind of understand, what happened with that encounter and how it affected their kind of use of that space.
Yeah. I have had a look at the map and read not all of the stories there because there's quite a few, but I've definitely clicked around a little bit at random and read some of the encounters. And you're exactly what you're saying. Some of them are super positive in the sense that they describe it as like a magical experience. They feel lucky to have seen this shark, or sometimes it's more of an annoyance or like a bit they're scared, like something bumped their stand-up paddleboard or something like that, right? What kind of takeaways have you gotten from the interviews so far? Like, what are you seeing most, maybe, or is there any surprises in there?
I think the biggest surprise to come out of the interview and the map really is that a lot of the people that are leaving their stories or I'm interviewing, they're staying in the water. So they might have seen a shark, or they had a shark come up and bump them, or it was underneath them and hovered there for a little bit and then swam off, and they stayed in the water. Their initial reaction wasn't, I need to get out, I need to leave this space and go back to the beach. They've actually stayed and continued whatever activity they were doing, whether that be stand-up paddleboarding, swimming, fishing. And that was something that was really surprising for me, because you kind of think that the common narrative normally is you see a shark and you get out of the water as soon as you can. But that was really kind of interesting perspective.
Why do you think that is? I mean, I know that's a lot of different stories in there, so I'm sure there's a lot of different reasons. But why do you think people do stay in the water after they have an encounter like that?
I think it really depends on a few things. I think the first thing is if they've had encounters before, so they feel a little bit more comfortable, and they're not scared. They just accept that that's part of choosing to be in the water, that you might see a shark.
Yeah.
And other times it might be the type of shark, so they might feel that it's not a danger to them. Some people are better at identifying sharks straight away than others, and they can tell that it's not a shark that they need to be worried about. And then other times they just don't care. It really comes down to they're really ambivalent about it. They just, it's whatever for them. But, it's really kind of interesting to kind of interview these people and find out, because there is such a broad range of perspectives, just not only on sharks, but how you deal with a shark encounter.
I'm trying to kind of read as many stories as I can as well, because it is really fascinating. And like you said, some people just like, there's a shark in the ocean, surprise, obviously there is one, and they're just happy to do what they're doing, even though they know there's sharks in the close vicinity. What is kind of the general advice, really? Does New South Wales Shark Smart have an advice on what to do in situations like this, or surf life saving clubs or anything like that?
Yeah, so the general advice is to avoid kind of being in the water with a shark, really. So that comes down to, not swimming at dusk or dawn, not swimming if there's murky water, if there's bait fish around, not swimming with animals, so, not jumping in with a dog, or not swimming alone either. that tends to be the general kind of advice that you're taught from a young age of like, this is how you avoid a shark. And then I think if you do see a shark, their advice normally is just to get out of the water, remove yourself from the situation.
It is funny though, because like you said, there's different types of sharks, and after a while you do get better at identifying them. And I have lived on the northern beaches for years, and I never realized that there's dusky whalers in Manly pretty much every single summer, and there can be lots of them. And the swimmers out there, they see them every summer. The people that swim in the morning groups, they're used to them basically.
Yeah.
So they're fine swimming with them because you can identify them straight away.
Yeah.
But obviously, if there's another shark there, it's funny because people have such a different opinion on what's safe and what's not so safe to do out there.
Yeah, I mean, people have a different opinion even when they have encountered sharks. It's really interesting. You find some people that, you know, they don't want to know about it again. They're like, yeah, I saw a shark, this happened to me, but that's it. Like, I don't put myself in that situation anymore, or I don't, you know, pay attention to the fact that there's all these apps that can tell me where sharks are. I don't want to know about it.
Yeah.
And then you have other people that are like, oh, I want to get in the ocean again. I want to go to that specific spot. I want to see that shark.
Yeah, that might be me.
Yeah. So like you said, like around here, the dusky whalers come every year, and people are fine with it. We have a place down in Wollongong, Bush Rangers Bay.
Yep.
And a lot of people go snorkeling there and diving there specifically because it's a nurse shark breeding ground. So you can go through it all throughout the year and there'll be nurse sharks there.
Yeah.
And that excites people and they want to go back. And some of the people I've interviewed, they had never encountered a shark before, but then they went free diving there and saw a shark, and now they go every other week because they feel an attachment and they've kind of watched these sharks grow up, and they want to keep going.
It's pretty magical though to see them out there.
Yeah, it's really exciting, and I can definitely understand why people kind of become so comfortable or feel that they have an attachment.
Yeah. And maybe to be a bit more specific as well, with these two types of sharks that we mentioned that probably most people do get a swimming encounter with if they're trying to do that in our area, dusky whalers and grey nurses. Has there ever really been a fatality? I'm sure maybe there's been some incidents, but like what's been recorded there with the negative encounters with these type of sharks?
I can't think of any that stand out off the top of my head. I know nurse sharks tend to not lash out. They tend to just leave an area if they feel frightened or threatened. They're so big when they become full grown that they just don't care.
Yep.
Like they tend to get a bit annoyed if people are around, but they'll just leave. They'll just leave the area.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't think off the top of my head if they've actually ever really bitten anyone. They might have, but that might have just been because in retaliation to someone doing something.
Yeah.
Humans tend to...
They're wild animals, so if you prod it enough, I'm sure it's going to bite you.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, humans have a tendency of not being able to keep our hands to ourselves. So in that situation, I'm sure they probably have lashed out, but I can't think of anything like someone swimming and they were bitten by a nurse shark. It tends to be either a white shark or a bull shark or a tiger shark in those instances.
Yeah. Let's go back a little bit with you. I wanted to ask another question in there, but I might leave that till later in the episode. But how did you kind of get your interest in sharks?
Yeah, I think the way I became interested in sharks is really interesting in itself. I grew up out west, so I was born in Canberra, grew up out in the country.
Far from the beach and any sharks.
Yeah, didn't really have any kind of involvement with the ocean until I really moved to the coast when I came to high school. And even then I wasn't overtly interested. I think this was just in the ocean, really. I wasn't the type of person that went swimming every day or wanted to go to the beach. I think for a year I tried to teach myself how to surf and wasn't any good at it. I have no balance, so it just didn't happen. Didn't really have any interest. And it wasn't until I went to university and actually joined a surf lifesaving club that I became really, really interested in the coast and the ocean. But in saying that, I've always had kind of an interest in animals and particularly kind of predators. Like I was always that kid that wanted to watch, Built for the Kill and those kind of documentaries.
Yeah.
And they tend to focus around kind of like tigers, sharks, bears. So I used to love like Shark Week and all that kind of stuff. And, and I think it also didn't help that I think I was quite young when my parents let me watch Jaws. So kind of really shaped my interest. But it wasn't until I got to university and actually started doing my geography degree that it really kind of shifted my perspective or my thinking on it, and I thought I could really contribute to the field and do some really interesting studies around this kind of topic.
Yeah. So when you decide to do a PhD, because I haven't done one, I've done a degree, but just a bachelor. Explain to me, when you do a PhD, do you have to find a new, I'm going to probably butcher this explanation, but is it, you have to come up with a new thesis or something that hasn't been done before? Is that the part of it?
So essentially you kind of, you put an application in and you have kind of an idea of what you want to do, and it's essentially contributing something new or finding a gap in the research field that you think that your work can fill. And that's essentially what my work's doing in a couple of different ways. It's using some methodology that hasn't been used in the area before.
For instance?
So it's called GIS, so Geographic Information Systems. So it's kind of the mapping platform, or the mapping kind of methodology.
Okay.
So it hasn't really been used in kind of the human-wildlife conflict area, human-shark relations area before. It's used in kind of tagging. So, you know, you've got like Dorsal Watch and the Shark Smart app where they actually tag and show where the sharks are and things. But it hasn't been used kind of in the other way to show where people have actually encountered sharks and kind of investigate their perspectives a little more and kind of go a little bit further in depth. It hasn't really been done in that way before.
Okay. So that's basically exactly what you explained before with the map that you can go on and you log the area and like the location of where you had an experience.
Yeah. So crowdsource mapping is kind of an aspect of GIS. It's qualitative GIS. So we're not just looking at the raw data or the stats of we've got this many encounters and things. We're actually looking for the quality of the kind of data. That's kind of the difference, quantity versus quality.
Okay. Yeah. So do you, this might be a silly question, but do you go through these, when people log their encounters, is there a way for you to go in and try and, you know, figure out if it's not necessarily what type of shark it is, but, you know, I feel like often when people tell a story on sharks, they're exaggerating a lot. It's like they've had a shark encounter and then it's definitely a white shark. And then you're like, maybe not.
So we can only go on the information that they're telling us.
Yeah.
So they do have the option to leave videos and photos if they have had them.
Okay.
I've had a couple that have left a few photos.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's only the information that they're telling us. So if they think it was, you know, a 4-meter great white or white shark that they saw, well then I have to assume that's what they saw. Like I wasn't there, so I don't know.
Fair enough.
So it's more about kind of understanding how they felt about the encounter and how it kind of affected their use of the ocean, really, is what we're trying to find. To show that, you know, shark encounters happen all the time. They happen everywhere. Yeah. And it's not something that we have to kind of try and stop from happening. It's something that we have to accept that's happening, and we have to figure out ways to kind of create a peaceful space for the humans to still use the ocean and the sharks to obviously still live there. So it's about showing that the mitigation that we might not be using, or that we are using currently, is definitely not effective. I mean, there's studies that already show that it's not effective, but there are other ways. Yeah,
it's a great point, and because really the only things that, like you said before, that come out of media around sharks is a negative experience when someone has a bite or anything worse than that, really. But like you're tracking all kinds of encounters. And we have a really big topic that's up now on the northern beaches about the shark nets, because I think there's so much misunderstanding around the shark nets, and I'm definitely no expert. I didn't really know anything about them before, and I've learned a little bit more the last few months and kind of trying to follow it now that they're potentially going to get rid of the shark nets across all of the northern beaches. It's gone through the council, and I think it has to go through the DPI next, and then go through. But maybe, can you explain a bit more how the shark nets work and why maybe that's such an old-fashioned way to do things?
So I'll first just completely state on the record that I'm not an expert on mitigation or the nets, but just from what I've read and kind of my research and things that I've found. But the nets, they're not kind of they don't create an enclosure. They're essentially a straight line that goes around a section of the beach. It doesn't even go round, it's just a line in the ocean that goes for a certain size of the beach. And it doesn't drop the whole way to the floor. So it's basically just this little tiny patch that's there.
Doesn't even go all the way to the top. I've seen sharks swim over
it. So most of the time, like, the interesting thing is when you see sharks, if people are seeing sharks on a netted beach, most of the time it's because the shark's actually stuck on the wrong side of the net. and they can't get out, or they're just trying to find a way out, and then that's when they're spotted. So they can go under, they can go round, they can go over. It's just kind of there. I kind of start to think personally that they're there just to kind of reassure people.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And then what also I've discovered, I find interesting with the general public, is that it's called a shark net, but it catches anything in the ocean, not just sharks.
Yeah.
But people think for some reason, because it's a shark net, that it only catches sharks. So I've seen turtles stuck in there, dolphins in there. There's everything, right?
Yeah, so the bycatch is ridiculous. I mean, the statistics are there. You can go on the DPI website. They do publish, how much they do catch and how many marine animals it does kill, because it does. It catches turtles, it catches fish, it catches whales as well.
Yeah.
You see it more up in Queensland, but they do tend to catch whales during the migration season. And that's really bad as well, obviously. They're a protected species. Most of the things they are catching are protected species, so we do need to protect them as well. So
yeah, I think if people were aware of all the bycatch, then they'd have at least a slightly different opinion on the nets.
Yeah. And I think if people actually understood the technology that we now have to watch for sharks and monitor for sharks, like the drone technology, that's a much better way for mitigation.
Do they use that at the surf club?
I think there is one member that is training to do it, but then there's also some issues around the fact that we're quite close to where they can land helicopters as well, so it might be a restricted area for us to use drones. But I know that they do on some of the beaches down in the Illawarra region. They have started using them, so they are proving to be useful.
Yeah, and that's how they discovered them at the surf event as well.
Yeah.
So I think they had different types of drones in the area. They had one type that were filming the event and the surfers, and then they had another drone that was operated by the Surf Lifesaving Club, and they were looking for sharks and found some.
So it shows it works. It's really good.
Probably in my opinion, it's probably more efficient because you can more easily, not always, but you can more easily identify what type of shark it is, which way it's moving, if it's moving away from the beach or if it's coming in. Or,
I think they're absolutely useful, because you can do that. You can see, that there might be a shark 300-400 meters away from a group of swimmers, but if it's swimming in the opposite direction, you can watch it, and then there's no need to shut an entire beach, because you can just see, it's actually swimming away from all these people, so there's no need to actually do anything. Like, it has every right to be there. It's ocean.
The more I see that, the shark sightings that I have with my drone, the more I think how often this happens, like close to people where they have no interest and they're just swimming past. It must happen all the time up and down the East Coast.
Oh, definitely. I tell people all the time, like, it doesn't matter where you go in the ocean, there's probably a shark nearby. Like, there's so many different types of sharks as well. Like, they live in all different environments in the ocean, so there's definitely going to be one around, and it's 9 times out of 10 not interested in whatever you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said there's so many different types of sharks. What are the most common sharks in New South Wales, like along the coastline? Do you... It might be a big question,
that is
but...
a big question. Yeah. I don't know.
Can you mention some of them? Because I thought in the beginning I was just saying either it was a great white, a bronze whaler, or a bull shark, but obviously there's more than that.
Yeah. So I think, like, we get a lot of nurse sharks down on the south coast. Thresher sharks as well, so they're the ones with the quite long tails.
Is that why they call the thresher shark? Because they thresh with a tail?
Maybe.
I don't know.
I'm not too sure. So we get a lot of them. Wobbegongs as well. So they're the ones that are, think they're fairly harmless, but they do bite, and when they bite, they tend not to let go. I actually had a participant put down on the map that he had been bitten by a wobbegong, and
I've heard that happen in Manly as well.
Yeah. So
apparently they don't look very dangerous, but they can be like a bit more aggressive than just like a normal fish, I think.
Yeah. So they tend to, because they sit on the floor, so a lot of the time when you get bitten, it's because they're kind of, you stand on them. You disturb them. Yeah, so it's reactionary.
They get annoyed.
Yeah. It's definitely not like, I want to go eat someone's foot. It's like, you came too close to me, get away.
Yeah. What is it about, like, with a wobbegong? Do they have big teeth, or I've never seen the teeth of a wobbegong?
They're not big, but they do some damage. I mean, the participant left in his remarks said that he needed to get stitches and things because it latched onto his leg pretty hard, so it didn't let go for a little bit. But Yeah, so it's interesting.
Yeah.
But I think the rates are kind of up and down. They fluctuate, obviously, dependent on a range of things. I mean, we don't understand why a lot of like white sharks and things move the way they do or come to certain areas. Obviously, they'll come if there's food around, so they might follow the whales or seals for migration reasons. But it's quite hard to kind of track sharks and where they go and why they do things. But
Unless they've been tagged, right?
yeah. So the tagging provides a lot more information and is able to provide researchers with some answers.
Yeah.
Not probably sometimes the answers you want, but they do provide answers. Sometimes can lead to more questions. But I think a lot of the other sharks we see are like hammerheads as well. So especially in the summer, there's a lot more hammerheads around, especially further down south.
And what type of hammerheads do we have here? Because we don't really have the giant one, do we?
No, they're more the kind of smaller ones. I think the photo you've got up there.
Yeah. It's at Warriewood, actually. That's a really small one.
Yeah, so they tend to be the ones that you'll see. They tend to swim together as well. So if you see, I think there was a few videos from the South Coast a couple of summers, maybe last summer or the summer before, where there was kind of 50, 60 swimming together.
Really?
Yeah, some really incredible footage, and that tends to be what they do,
Yeah. Have you had any stories from the interviews that you've had around white sharks at all in our area?
Yes, I have. I've had two interviews. I've had a few more kind of stories from the map, but two interviews. One, both of them actually were a little bit kind of more on the fear side than the exciting side. One was around the islands just off Wollongong, the 5 islands. They were ski paddling around the far side, and as they came around, they saw a bunch of fishing boats and were kind of yelled at by the fishermen to kind of, what are you doing out here? It's like, there's sharks. Are you?
But they were on jet skis?
No, they're on skis, so surf skis.
Surf skis,
yeah,
oh wow.
So quite low in the water.
How long is that paddle?
I think it's about a 2-hour paddle round and back, yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, definitely like not something I'm going to do, but people in my surf club have done. It's definitely for the elite athletes of the club. But they were yelled at fishermen for being out there, and then about 2 minutes later saw a very large fin of a white shark. And thought, okay, this is probably not something we're going to do again. And then another one.
But nothing happened, like just saw this fin.
Just came up and made its presence known that it was there.
Yeah.
And then the other one, he was kayaking, so ocean kayaking, quite close to the shore, and stopped to fix a handle and was bumped by a great white or a white shark. So it had come up, and in that situation, he kind of said it really put into perspective the whole predator-prey situation. It was very much on the prey end, because it had obviously been watching them for a while, because it didn't come up and bump him until he'd actually stopped.
Wow.
And then, he got out of the water, and they'd sent a jet ski out to try and find it, and they found it. And that as I was saying before, that situation very much, the shark had hung around.
Yeah.
And, they'd had the conversation, maybe we should go back in, like, we'll just go and keep going. And if they'd gone back in, it would have still been there. So that kind of puts that little bit of kind of fear into you.
Yeah. Well, definitely a lot of respect. Like, you can't mess around too much with these things.
Yeah, well, this participant was very adamant that he was never ocean kayaking again.
Really?
So, yeah, really.
Okay, I was going to ask about that, because I wanted to hear as well what you think are the... as we said before, there's a wide spectrum of reactions towards this, but what are people's opinion like in general around sharks on the South Coast? Like, do you feel like people are used to them in the water there, and do they want to get rid of shark nets and all that kind of stuff, or do people want to just get rid of the sharks altogether?
Yeah, so I think there's a real wide range of responses. I think we don't have the history of people being bitten on the coast as much as they do kind of, if you think north coast of New South Wales. I mean...
Or in WA.
In WA, yeah. So we don't have that history. I think there's been a couple of people where they've been bitten in Kiama, which is a bit further south of Wollongong, and then I think there was a fatality down in Tathra, which is down near kind of Bega, Eden Way, where a early morning swimmer was actually killed.
By a white shark, do they think? Or
I can't remember which one it was off the top of my head. I think it might have either been a tiger shark from memory. But yeah, so they're kind of the most prominent incidents and most recent incidents we have of people actually being bitten. So yeah, there's a little bit more of a relaxed kind of feeling towards them. People tend to also get quite excited when there's sharks spotted in the area.
Yeah.
Last year we had a whale carcass wash up at Bulli, which is a northern suburb of Wollongong, and it had washed up and it obviously attracted a lot of sharks, and there was a lot of white sharks, quite large white
big
sharks,
ones, yeah.
that had come in, and I think 200 people showed up at the beach with drones.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, drones and cameras and everything else. Not just, it was the spectacle of the carcass there, but also there were sharks, and that's what people wanted to see. And then, there's boats and everyone in the water trying to get photos and see these sharks. And I think one of the sharks actually had a go at one of the motors of the small tinny that had gone out because it was annoying it. So that caused a lot of excitement in the town because everyone was like, "Oh, this never happens." So yeah, I think incidents like those people get excited about. But in terms of the nets, I think there's a lot of lack of education. Really, people don't know that the nets are there.
Are there a lot of nets on the south coast? Because I know on most of the beaches here there's nets, but
there are beaches there are nets at the kind of popular beaches. So Wollongong, North Wollongong. I think there's one at Austinmere or Thirroul, which is a northern suburb as well. So I think there are a few around, but they're not as many obviously in Sydney, just because we have so many beaches.
Yeah.
And it's
less people.
Yeah. So kind of blessed in that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's not as many, but people, when you do ask them if they do know about them, they tend to be more in favour of getting rid of them.
Yeah.
And I think that also comes down to the fact that we don't see sharks very often either.
I feel like it is rare that you hear. Well, maybe people have encounters down there, but just they don't tell everyone. Whereas if it happens, like if a white shark would swim through Manly, you'd be guaranteed to hear about it. Or same at Bondi, right? Like it's just, there's so many people flying drones and so many people swimming in the water. You'd almost certainly see it.
And I think that's like part of the reason I wanted to do the research on the South Coast is because there isn't much information. I mean, there's plenty of studies that have been done about, perspectives on sharks in Sydney or how people react to bites, shark bites in Sydney, or, there's plenty of research done up on the North Coast as well, just because it is quite prominent in that area. But there hasn't been a lot of work done on the South Coast, and that's part of the reason, or one of the reasons I wanted to kind of focus on that area. Yeah. It's not only because I am a local down there and have a vested interest, but I wanted to kind of find out more about it. I mean, it was such a big part of the coast, and it's such a important aspect of a lot of people's lives. Like these encounters have to be happening. And as the map's showing, they are. It's just, not in the kind of ways that you typically think they would be.
Typically hear about. Yeah. How many entries, I guess you can call it, do you have on the crowdsourcing map now?
I think there's about 48 at the moment. Yeah, off the top of my head.
Do you have a goal for how many before you kind of close it, or?
I think at this point we're probably just going to leave it up for however long. It seems to be getting interest just from people going on and looking at it. Yeah. So that's a story in itself, that the people actually are interested in seeing where other people are having encounters. But yeah, we're going to leave it up for an extended period, and I'd love to have more people. I mean, all data is good data, so as many people who contribute is good. But I think the goal originally was to about 80 to 100, so a little bit more is what we're after. Yeah.
I feel like maybe this year, now that we can't do international travel and there's like maybe less pollution in the water, but there's also more local people enjoying the ocean, maybe there are more encounters in the last 12 months than usual. I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, there is a lot of kind of interest in research now going into encounters or shark bites increasing in Australia. I mean, last year was the highest we've had since I think 1936 from memory.
Last year, 2020.
Yeah, so 2019 to 2020 season. Yeah.
The summer
it goes
season.
over the summer season, so it was the largest number of shark bites we've had in Australia since 1936, I think.
Was that because we had quite a few in South Australia and WA, or was
it's not just New South Wales, it's obviously the whole country, but coincidentally marry or ties into the first year that they actually started putting the nets up in Sydney as well. So
oh really?
Yeah, so they've they're pretty old.
Yeah.
They've been going since about that period. So it was when they had that really large spike in kind of the 30s that they put the nets in.
Yeah.
And this last season was the first time it's kind of totaled or surpassed that number.
Yeah. Yeah, wow, because from what I understand, so the nets have almost been there for 100 years, and from what I understand with the studies that has been shown has that like the nets doesn't really have any effect on the human interactions, right? Like it's neither more or less. Is that correct, or?
Yeah, so my supervisor, Dr. Leah Gibbs, she's actually done a lot of work on this area in terms of the effectiveness of the nets and mitigation in general. And her research kind of found that observation, so putting more money into drone technology or having spotters, so lifesavers, lifeguards, actually looking for sharks would be more effective than the nets, more on a kind of conservation level. So because you obviously having people watching and having drones doesn't result in other marine life being killed by nets.
Yeah, we had pretty recently we had an incident in Manly where they caught a shark in the net, and I believe the boats that pull the sharks out or whatever else they're catching, they're meant to pull it out on the opposite side of the beach so the public can't see it. But this time, someone's obviously stuffed up on the boat, and they pulled it up on the beach side, so there was a lot of photos of it. Now, they did go out saying that it was a dusky whaler, but the size of that shark was ginormous. I've never seen a dusky whaler that size, and it looked like it had a very wide belly.
Yeah.
So, like after that photo went around on social media and stuff, there was a bit more discussion around like, well, what are you killing out there and what's happening with all these nets? So, yeah, it's interesting. And then when you read the comments, there's like all kinds of views. Like some people obviously against it, some people are for it, some people think that people are against the nets. They, rate animal life higher than human life, and it gets funky pretty quickly, those discussions. But yeah, it's interesting to see how people react to it, right?
Yeah. It's the nets are a very I can't think of the word, but it's a very kind of hard grey area in terms of conservation versus protection of human life. I mean, I think the government has this fear that if they immediately pull the nets out and in the next month or so if someone's bitten, then you're going to have people turn around and say, oh, that might not have happened if the nets had been in, where research kind of shows it probably would have anyway, but it comes down to that lack of education really. But yeah, there's that kind of issue about, if we do take them out and someone does get bitten, then how are people going to react? How's the public going to react to that? Especially if it comes around to summer and there is kind of that rise in people being bitten again, then it's the government's job to kind of protect people, but
be an important timing thing.
Yeah,
right? Because people will look at it like, it's a good point what you're saying, because if the timing's really bad with another attack, even though statistically let's say over 10 years, the attacks have gone down, then it's not going to look like that.
Yeah. It's really, like, I don't envy people at DPI. I don't know how they can do it, because I mean, a lot of them are marine biologists and things, so they probably have different opinions on the nets than probably the government's trying to put out. But it's a very controversial topic.
Yeah,
I think.
absolutely.
And I think some of the people I talk to, a lot of the kind of pro sharks, pro conservation, are very kind of conspiratorial in their views around the nets and the transparency of the government when it comes to the nets. Which you don't know how much is true, I guess.
Personally, I don't know. Like, I guess the right answer is we don't really know, because I have no data on what's actually happening there. I would maybe be a little bit suspicious on the data of what other sea life gets killed in the nets, because I'm sure it's easy to fudge those numbers. Let's say if they, if those shark nets killed, just a random number, 100 turtles a year, they can maybe just log 50. Like, who's there to control that number, right? Like, it's
it is.
I don't know.
The transparency around it is an issue, I think, for a lot of people, and it's obviously, the statistics are there. You can go and find them, but it's the fact that you have to go and find them, I think, that also is an issue for a lot of people.
And it's probably also logged by the people on the boat and who knows
Yeah.
what gets logged there. Anyway,
Yeah,
the whole grey area.
It's a whole area that
Yeah.
I just did not want to get into with my research. I was like,
Yeah.
let's just talk about people who see sharks and encounter sharks, and
Yeah.
mitigation discussions are for other researchers.
I love that angle though, because you are highlighting a lot of positive experiences, and I think that's awesome.
Yeah, definitely to show you, like, you know, they're not those big scary man-eaters that you see on TV, or
Yeah.
like, you know, Channel 7 runs a documentary like 2 weeks ago being like, you know, facing the man-eaters and things like that, and it's like, well,
And there's grey nurses in the shallows or something.
yeah, like it's
Yeah.
not the case. Like,
Yeah.
even great whites to an extent, they can't help it. I mean, they're that big and
Yeah.
their eyesight's not that great, and they don't have hands. Like,
Yeah.
they trying to work out what you are, and then they bite you, and it's like, well, of course you're going to bleed out. You're half the size. Like, it's really not their fault sometimes. They don't know what you are. They don't have the cognizance to kind of know that you're a human or a shark until they bite, a human or a seal until they bite you.
Yeah.
So,
And I have to say, I've seen a lot of videos lately of massive great whites being literally a meter away from surfers, and they don't do anything. They just check them out for a little bit and then swim away.
yeah, and like a
Which
lot of...
stops your heart when you're looking. Like, you just like can't breathe when you watch those videos. But
definitely. Like, I talk about it now and be like, oh, you know, they're not doing anything. But I think very different if I was in the water.
Yeah. Or even if I was filming it, I'd be like so scared. Definitely don't want to film anyone getting eaten.
Yeah. But I mean, there's a Instagrammer and marine biologist, Ocean Ramsey. I don't know if you're familiar with her. But yeah, she does so much work and gets in the water, completely free dives with massive great whites, and they don't do anything. Like, they're just there.
Yeah.
They're placid, and I think also when they get that big, they're obviously a lot older as well, and so they're
More
just
experienced.
Yeah, and they're just not really interested.
Yeah.
Like, they know what they want, and they don't want people. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. Amazing to watch the stuff she does. She's obviously got a very high experience level, so it's not necessarily something we recommend going out doing.
Oh yeah, definitely not. Like, you leave it to the experts, and she's definitely an expert.
Absolutely. Yeah. Have you? I was going to ask, what's your plans after your PhD? Do you think? Like, where do you want to continue to work with sharks, or?
I think so. It really depends on what the kind of end result of this research is as well. I mean, I love working in academia, and it's something I'd love to continue doing. Financially is probably not the best decision, but current environment when it comes to university work is a bit precarious. But I love researching, and I love talking to people, and that's something that if I continue to do that around sharks will be great. But yeah, it really depends on what this kind of research shows. I'd love to expand it out and not only focus on the South Coast, but I think that's definitely way too big of a scope for just like a PhD project. My supervisor and I have these grand plans of, you know, expanding this map out worldwide and finding out everything we can. But yeah, definitely not something I could just do in the space of 3.5, 4 years.
Yeah, I really think it would be interesting to do in WA, because there must be, if you think that the South Coast is kind of rugged and there's lots of sharks encounters that we don't necessarily hear about, WA is probably even crazier than that. Yeah,
WA is an interesting kind of research area when it comes to sharks. There's been some work done over there back when the kind of culling program was introduced. Some researchers from UAW, my supervisor,
really?
Dr. Leah Gibbs and Dr. Andrew Warren, they went over and did some interviews and things.
Oh, wow.
And trying to understand the kind of politics around shark encounters and things. And it produced some really interesting data. But yeah, I think it would definitely be worth going back over and doing some more work over there. Because there is a lot of different kind of experiences and opinions over there. It's a very highly charged topic, I think, for WA, because they do have so many kind of fatalities.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, did they have 7 or something through that summer, that really bad summer?
Yeah, so that 2014-15 period, I think there was 7 fatalities that led to them kind of the Barnett government introducing the kind of culling program, which obviously was completely barbaric and was completely ineffective, and obviously the scientific community and conservation community really came together and protested, and really saw a big movement, and probably, you know, one of the first in Australia to really show like sharks need protection and they need saving, and that's on us. So yeah, it was a really interesting kind of time for the space.
Can you explain a little bit why that was a bit pointless, what they did, and like I've obviously heard a bit about that, but yeah, maybe explain why it was inefficient or not necessarily the right thing to do.
Yeah, so as we were saying before, kind of jokingly, you know, when sharks bite people, it's because they don't really, it's normally a mistaken identity, really. They think that you're a seal, or they think that you're something that you can eat, and we don't taste very nice to sharks. We don't have enough fat on us, so they don't really like us. And so yeah, most of the time it was just wrong place, wrong time, which is really sad. Like, people obviously lost their lives, and it's horrible, but yeah, you don't know. Like, sharks move so quickly. If someone's bitten in one place, just because another shark or a shark's still there doesn't mean that it was the same shark, and doesn't also mean that the shark's going to bite someone again. Like, it's not like that there's evil creatures. So the culling program that they had in place was, you know, they were baiting drum lines and catching the sharks and then killing those sharks if they weren't already dead. And yeah, it's just doing more damage to the population rather than protecting people. Obviously, means there would be less sharks in the area, but they're a migratory species, so they're just going to come and go. It doesn't mean that there'll be less sharks there next year.
Yeah.
I mean, if you keep doing it, obviously you will cause a decline in the population, so there will, in time, be a lack of sharks, but then that has consequences for the overall ecosystem of the ocean and things.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and what you mentioned there as well, they're migrating, right? So there's not, often I feel like people say, oh yeah, there's a great white that lives out there all the time, but that's not necessarily true, is it? Or
it depends for the species of shark too.
Okay.
I mean, one of the really great things with the tagging systems that you have, that we have now, is that you tag a shark and you can see where they are actually going. So, you know, you can look on, I think, like Dorsal Watch, which is a platform I mentioned earlier. They do a lot of work and they've tagged a lot of sharks, and you can see that they tend to stay around the same coastline, but that coastline might be 100 kilometers long and they're going up and down over a period of years. So just because, you know, it's there 1 month doesn't mean it's going to be there the next. It might be 50 k's away or 100 k's away somewhere else.
Which is a fair bit of distance. Like, it's not like it's living in the same headland for 2 years or whatever.
No, definitely not. Like, they do travel, but they do have their spots that they like to go to. I mean...
and is that the same for whites, tigers and bulls, or is it...
Again, it differs. Bull sharks are a whole different story. I mean, I think they're colloquially referred to as the kind of pit bulls of the ocean, because they are quite aggressive.
A bit more crazy than others.
Yeah, and they also can swim in fresh water too, which is a bit terrifying. I mean, they live a lot in estuaries and rivers, and the Grafton River up on the north coast is a big breeding area for bull sharks. So...
Oh, really? Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I think it's the Clarence, whichever river. It's one of them up there. I'm a geographer, but my directions and knowledge of places is probably terrible. But yeah, so they do breed up there quite often as well. So there's a lot of bull sharks around to that area.
Yeah, and they're meant to, like you said, meant to be a bit more aggressive.
Yeah, they can be, and they've been known to kind of hunt in packs and things as well. So people ask me,
crazy.
Like, what shark scares you the most? And it's like, well, I think tiger sharks and bull sharks are more frightening than great whites. Or with white sharks, if I was going to be in the water with one, I'd probably prefer to be in the water with a white shark than a bull shark or a tiger shark. But
I've heard so many people say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we can talk a bit more about the friendlier types of sharks that we have here locally, because I did have some questions around that.
Yeah, of course.
Like I mentioned before, this is the first year that I've swam with dusky whalers in Manly at Shelley, and I didn't realize that people do this every year, and it's a really cool experience. They're small ones, so they're juveniles, but they're only here a certain time of the year, and then they move on. But yeah, what do you know about the dusky whalers and the experiences people have, and how do they operate?
Yeah, so I'm not overtly familiar with dusky whalers. We don't get a lot down kind of on the southern side. I think they kind of like this area for breeding just because it's protected.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have heard some people have encounters with them, and they tend to be fairly relaxed. They can be a little bit inquisitive at times, but they're not, you know, out to get you kind of thing.
They're so small as well.
Yeah, they're tiny. Like they're in the grand scheme of things, they're on the smaller end of the shark species. But yeah, they're quite inquisitive, kind of curious at times. But then most of the time, they're happy just to continue on their way and do their own thing. So is that kind of what you found when you were in the water with them?
Yeah. So I've tried to swim with them a lot, and it differs from time to time. I felt like in the beginning when they came in, they're way more shy. But especially at Manly, after a few weeks, they must be getting used to people, because there's a group that swims in Manly every morning, and there's, I think, hundreds of swimmers. The Bold and the Beautiful, they're called, and they all wear these pink swim caps. And I don't even know if some of them see them, because they just hammer over them. And in the beginning, the dusky whales would just scurry away quickly, and then you don't see them for a while. But after a few weeks, they were just, I think, getting used to it, and they were just cruising underneath them. Obviously, they get a little bit out of the way, but yeah, they just get more and more familiar with it, and then the numbers kind of were increasing, and then now they're decreasing again. So I think some of them are moving out, and I think we're kind of right at the tail end of the season now, and then they're getting more shy again. So yeah, I've kind of had some really good swims where they're getting close and just swim around you a bit, and then some where they just, as soon as they see you, they're out of there.
Yeah. I think that really comes down to like how old they are as well. So if they're younger, they don't have that experience or knowledge, and so it's a learning experience for them as much as it is us. So
yeah,
they'll tend to flee because obviously also their size too. The smaller they are, the more they feel that they're threatened.
Yeah,
it's not until they get a bit bigger.
That is a good point.
Yeah.
So do you know where they go after they move out, like after summer, or what?
No, I'm not.
If they go north, or I'm not sure. Follow the warmer water.
I'm assuming they might. A lot of sharks tend to follow the kind of currents, whether that be cold or hot, depending on what they're after as well for food.
Yeah.
So I know there were a lot of discussions around, we are seeing more sharks on the coast, on the east coast. Is that down to a range of factors like climate change, because the ocean's temperatures are increasing? Is that bringing them in closer because they're following those currents? Is it, we're overfishing the ocean, so they're coming in because they're after food that is smaller, so it lives close to the ocean, close to the coast? Or is it even down to the fact that the whale numbers are increasing again due to conservation, so they're following the migration patterns there?
There's so many things, right?
There's
like,
so many
what
options.
do you know is true or not true?
Yeah,
it's crazy.
so it could be all three, or it could be something completely different. We're just not sure.
Yeah. I did recently see some studies both in the UK and in California, where they're seeing more. Well, so they're thinking this summer they might get great whites in the UK because of the rising temperature, and then in California they've had more whites further. See if I get the direction right. Further north, I think, because of the rising temperature.
So they get, in the States, I've seen they get a lot of whites around the kind of southern areas, especially that on the East Coast. So they get a lot around Florida and up to the Cape and things. And as the temperatures are increasing, they are seeing more and more further north.
Yeah, in areas where they haven't seen them before.
Yeah, where they haven't been documented before. I mean, they could be there, just no one's seen them. But they're being documented as moving further and further north, which it's kind of interesting because a similar thing is happening here, not so much with sharks, but with orca. So we're starting to see orca whales, killer whales, coming further and further north than previously.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, someone was telling me the other day that they saw one down at Jervis Bay, which I've never heard of. Yeah.
Wow.
I know that they've been documented coming up like to Eden and those places, but never that far north. So. And
was the Jervis Bay one a confirmed sighting, or was it someone that?
It was just an anecdotal.
Okay,
so I'd have to go.
Not 100% sure, like potentially.
I'd have to go and confirm it, but
they're pretty easy to identify.
Pretty identifiable. So I think it was probably correct, but so that kind of movement, because of climate change, is another factor that is probably going to attract a lot of research in the next couple of years, or
orcas are the apex predator, right? They can feed on great whites, I believe.
So there was an actual filmed, I guess you'd call it an incident. I think it was last year in South Australia, where they filmed some orca killing a great white.
Feeding on a great white.
They
Wow.
hunted and killed a great white, which has never been caught on camera before. So yeah, that was pretty insane. I mean, that would be something that I think would stay with you forever if you watched
it'd be
that.
crazy to
like,
watch.
They are pretty ruthless hunting machines, though. Those guys. So
Yeah, absolutely. I saw there was a recent clip as well that came out of WA where a pack of orcas killed a blue whale. So a massive whale, which is just like you watch that and it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
But has there ever been any instance, do you know, of an orca and a human interaction in Australia? I don't think I've ever seen that. I know there's been some in New Zealand.
Not in Australia, not off the top of my head. I think in Eden there's some stories that they used to, back when they whaled down there in like 1800s, they used to kind of help the whalers kind of...
Oh, the orcas would?
Yeah, like catch...
For an easy feed.
Catch the whales, so it's kind of them working in tandem almost. So I think that's probably like the closest. There's nothing off the top of my head that I can think of anyone actually being in the water, being interacting with an orca. But there's also been no documented bites by orcas in the wild anyway. I mean,
globally?
Yeah,
really?
No.
Okay,
so I know it like...
Oh yeah, there's the one incident in the captivity.
SeaWorld, where people have been killed by them. Really good documentary, Blackfish, if you want to go watch it. Just a plug for those guys. There's been none in the wild.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Which is quite interesting.
Yeah. So I'm actually from Norway,
Yeah.
and we get a lot of orcas there.
Yeah.
And I've seen more and more people purposely trying to swim with them now.
Yeah.
Which is, it looks crazy. And we also don't get a lot of clear water there. There's not a lot of good visibility.
Yeah.
So when they get all the elements coming together, like they get some in the fjord and it's clear water and they get to swim with them, it looks, a lot of work needed to try and do that.
Yeah, really like chance, I think, with that one.
And real cold.
Yeah, I have friends from Finland and they tell me about the cold, and I get cold when it's 16 degrees here, so not made for the Nordic, I don't think.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so what's kind of happening next for you with the studies? I'm sure there's a lot of work left in your PhD and things that you need to do. What does that kind of look like for you?
Yeah, so currently in the middle of field work, so currently doing lots of interviews, lots of collecting data, writing it up, starting to write some work to get it published, and obviously working on my thesis. Yeah. And hopefully get some really interesting information. I already have, but some more information to kind of contribute to what I'm already finding, and really form an interesting kind of study. Yeah.
How are you sourcing the interviews? Is it easy to find them now, or is it like, do you have to actively get out there? And
I have to somewhat actively get out there. I had a bit of media attention from the local media a couple of weeks ago, which really helped get it out there. And now it's just kind of following that up, and also participants that I've already interviewed or have already contacted me, talking to them as well, because they know, obviously, if they're surfers or divers, they have friends, and it's kind of contacting those people as well. It's what we call snowballing.
Yeah. I guess they've known other people that have had similar experiences.
So it's just a matter of getting them to kind of contact their friends and be like, hey, talk to this person, and then getting back to me.
Do you target specific groups like spearfishers or surfers or anything like that?
Initially when we first went live with it, I did do a bunch of kind of researching on social media to find groups and share it there, and some of those some of them were very receptive, and others were a little bit, didn't really want a bar of it. I found the fishers were a little bit less forthcoming and didn't really want to chat.
Fishermen, yeah.
They were a little bit worried about, us using the information to create a marine park where they couldn't fish anymore. So it was kind of, saw it as like a negative kind of thing that they'd be contributing to.
I guess... I've got friends that fish, and a lot of them are. So you should maybe make this clear. So it's not illegal to fish any sharks on the East Coast, except for whites, maybe, or is it illegal to target sharks in fishing?
I'm not 100% sure. I think it is if it's in an actual designated area. Yeah. But I'm not sure. I think it might be down to size and things that you're not allowed to. Yeah. It's not...
Because I feel like a lot of fishermen are like worried that they're going to be ousted if they catch a shark, right?
Yeah. Some will do it. Some will go out and that's all they do. Others, it's an inconvenience if they catch a shark.
Yeah, usually it is. Because quite recently, someone caught a pretty big tiger just off Sydney. Yeah, and that was a whole debacle.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure if it's like illegal. I think it's more kind of like socially
frowned upon.
Yeah, it's not really an accepted thing.
Well, you can't really eat them, and if you fish them just to kill them, what's the point?
Yeah, it's a little bit inhumane, I guess. If you're just gonna go out and kill something for the sake of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not 100% sure what the policies are around whether it's illegal or not. Yeah, it's not something I condone at all. I don't think we should do it at all. But yeah.
But yeah, that's probably why fishermen are a little bit more reluctant to tell the stories around sharks, maybe.
Yeah. Like I have had some that have left stories, and that was, a shark came up and circled their boat or took their line when they were fishing, and so those stories were kind of interesting. It wasn't so much they were catching a shark; it was more just a shark was attracted by the activity that they were doing.
Yeah.
It kind of sensed the annoyance in those. It was more annoying than exciting or fearful. It was just I was fishing and they took my fish.
Yeah.
That was mine.
It's I guess that's I'm similar-ish with spearfishers. I guess it's like they like we said before, they have fish on the line and then they get a big shark coming in to have a look at it.
And then it's the shark's a little bit too big to kind of fight off your fish, so they can have the fish.
Have you had I forgot to ask you this, have you had any stories around bronze whalers, which is maybe the more common shark that we get on the coast?
I have had some bronze whaler stories. A few kind of swimmers, they come around the point and come face to face, and they're like,
"Oh, really?
I'm gonna get out of the water now."
Where on the coast was that?
I think that was further down south, around kind of Bendalong, Jervis Bay kind of area. Yeah.
I feel like it's way more sharky down that way, like in closer to the shore with big sharks that people see.
I think so. I wish I'd have more people contributing down that way to kind of back it up. A lot of people seem to just be telling me stuff around Wollongong, which is great. I mean, I love it. But I'd love if we had a little bit more kind of contribution from down the south coast.
You might have to go down there and just go to the pub
and
find some people that fish or spearfish and just have a few beers with them.
Yeah, go sit on the beach and find some people, I think.
I'm sure there'll be lots of stories down there.
I think so. The other thing we're finding, a lot of surfers don't want to come in those areas because they don't want to give away their secret surfing spots.
Yeah.
Which is really frustrating because I'm not looking for the actual geographical point of where you had the shark. It's more the narrative that I want.
Yeah.
But
that might be a good point though, because maybe you can make that clearer that you don't necessarily have to give away the geographical position publicly, but you just want the story down there.
It's something we're trying to get across slowly. That's another kind of block we've found.
I had an interesting story from a couple of surfers down on the south coast, and same, I don't really want to give away the location. I can give it to you after, but
Sure.
But there's whites there pretty much every summer, and I filmed 4 whites. I'd say the closest they got to 2 surfers was 100 meters. They were juvenile whites, but still pretty big, maybe like 2-3 meters. And I just followed the sharks. This was at sunset, and then I waited around till the surfers came back in because one, I didn't really want to just leave when I knew there was sharks there, and if something happened to the surfers the next morning, I'd feel real bad. But I also didn't want to just yell and say like they had to come in. So I spoke to them when they came back in on the beach, and they were interested in like seeing that I'd seen the sharks out there, but they also said they know that they're every year and they surf there all the time. They surf there for 10-15 years, and it's just part of it. And they said that there's never been an incident down there with a white, so they know that they're every summer. They surf with them in close proximity, I would say. And I'm a keen surfer. I don't know if I would surf there. And they're just used to it.
Yeah. You do find, I have spoken to a few people, kind of the old boys of the surf club, as I tend to refer to them. And they're the same. They've been in the ocean their whole lives, 50, 60 years, and they've seen everything. And they're like, yeah, there's sharks there. That's fine.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't bother me. I don't bother him. That's kind of the mentality they have. And I don't know if I'd have the nerve to
Yeah,
have that
same.
mentality.
Yeah.
But yeah, credit to them. They're quite an interesting kind of bunch to talk to because they are so relaxed about it.
Yeah, they know what I guess they kind of know the risk they're taking, and they're happy to accept that.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of people are. That's the kind of thing, you're going into their environment. It's their home. You can't just put a wall up and expect, them to stay on one side and you to stay on the other. It's the risk you take. Yeah.
Yeah. Interestingly, though, they were more curious about if it was a big shark, because then they kind of gave the impression that, well, if it was a really big shark, they'd be really nervous. But I felt like the smaller juvenile sharks are a bit more unpredictable, I guess. Whereas when I've seen a bigger adult shark, they cruise further out back and they are just very slow and kind of more, a bit more predictive with the way they move. It doesn't look like they're really interested in anything close to shore. Whereas the smaller juvenile ones are a bit more in and out, back and forth. Like, I don't know. I think I'd be more scared of a juvenile one.
I kind of have that opinion too, especially with the white sharks, because the juveniles tend to be a little bit more active.
Yeah.
And the big ones, because they just kind of cruise along. They know what they want. They know where it is. They're fine looking for kind of bigger things to eat. Whereas the juveniles tend to be quicker and almost like they need to prove themselves in a way.
Yeah. And they're just exploring things. They don't know better. So they're just like, I'll bite this to see what it is.
Exactly. Yeah.
Have you had any stories where there's been different types of sharks interacting with people? Like,
not at once. I've had some people who have had multiple encounters, and then they've encountered different types of sharks.
Yeah.
But never like two different types of sharks at once.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that obviously does happen. Especially if there's like things like big kind of things that they can eat, like whale carcasses and things like that.
Yeah.
You do get multiple sharks showing up. But no one's that I've spoken to has encountered multiple sharks at once, which
would be a bit chaotic. Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely not different types. Like obviously you have the divers and things that encounter multiple nurse sharks at the same time and things, but and they're not, turning around and seeing a great white sitting there as well. Like,
I guess do the whites kind of dominate? So if there's white sharks in the area, other sharks will disappear? Or I don't know if that's true or not.
I think it comes down to the size more than the type, I think.
Just a bigger shark will be more dominant.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, like I think the tiger sharks are just as kind of intimidating as a white shark. Yeah. And then it just comes down to who's bigger.
Yeah. They animal realm, that's how it works.
Yeah. And they do kind of not so much fight each other, but they do compete with one another if there is a food source there that they both want.
Have you had stories with tiger sharks on the south coast?
Yeah, I've had a couple. Yeah,
confirmed ones.
Yeah, confirmed. Yeah,
wow.
Tiger sharks are pretty obvious to tell, identify. They've got those pretty nice stripes, and it's fairly easy to tell them. Yeah.
Have there been? What kind of stories have there been? Do you have any examples? Or?
So the one that I mentioned earlier with the spearfisher, that was a tiger shark. I've also heard one from someone else who has not put on the map, but has told me the story of his surfer. Got bumped by a tiger shark and got out of the water fairly quickly because it was a rather big shark. And I completely understand. Tiger sharks are the ones that intimidate me the most. I've never seen one, but I think if I was in the water with one, I'd be leaving the area fairly quickly.
I'd love to see one with a drone. It's so rare that I hear stories where they're coming close to shore in New South Wales, or at least down our way, maybe further up north. But, I think they do see them up north a little bit more than down here. I've only had those kind of two. I think there's maybe one other that said it might have been a tiger shark, but they weren't sure. It'd be hard to tell for sure. Alrighty, well, Teaniel, thank you so much for coming on. There was a lot of fun stories. Probably could talk sharks all day. But,
definitely.
I'm super curious how you go with your studies as well, and what stories you're collecting. Are you going to publish that just around the stories that you get, not a scientific paper as much, or are you just going to keep the crowdsourcing map, and then that's the best place for people to go and have a read?
So people can go look at the map. And then, I will hopefully obviously be publishing some actual academic papers on it. But I think I might also end up writing a few kind of not so much academic.
Not so scientific.
Maybe we'll see. I think there's something in the pipeline, but we'll see. I can't talk too much about it right now. But yeah, we'll see if that happens as well. So that might be a little bit more accessible for people.
Yeah, people always love those stories. I'm part of a freediver Facebook group, and quite recently someone posted a question about, tell us about your experience with sharks, or this person was particularly looking for bull shark experiences and how to behave around them. And the amount of comments and stories that was in the, like, I read a lot of them, but not all of them. There were so many, and there's people, they're always fascinated by that stuff.
Yeah. It's a human fascination, I think, because it's something we don't fully understand, and therefore we just want to know everything about it.
And we're a little bit scared of, and we have a lot of respect for it.
It's that whole thing. You put the blood and the gore. It's the top story for the news, and it gets everyone's attention. I think that's kind of where sharks lie, which is a bit of a misunderstanding, unfortunately. But they're exciting creatures without the whole fear behind them as well.
Absolutely. That's a good note to finish on. Thank you so much for coming on, and best of luck with your study.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.